the round 4 action from the candidates today. So we'll jump right in today to our first game. Fabiano Caruana versus Jan Nepomniachtchi. Fabiano lost yesterday to Ding, and he's facing one of the co-leaders today in Nepo. So let's check it out with our nice little opening explore. And we have a Grunfeld on the board. Pretty standard stuff here. It's been played many, many times before. Your host has played this many times before as white. So all still within known territory here. And they just continue to churn out theory, and H4 is your novelty here from Fabi, which I would say is a fairly good one. Couple things. White secures a G5 as an outpost for pieces, and also reserves the ability to play H5. And Fabi seems slightly better here, so Nepo trades on C1. And H5, so Fabi goes to rupture Nepo's king-size structure, but Nepo trades rooks anyway. Queen to C8. And this is basically a draw offer from Nepo. He's traded all the rooks off the board, and now he's trying to trade the queens. So H6 from Fabi, bishop F8. D5, you have your trademark Grunfeld pawn on D5. E6. Knight to C3, so shutting down queen trades for now. Knight C4. Captures on C4, and so we have this another trademark of the Grunfeld is getting your past D pawn for white, and Fabi practically seems slightly better here. Nepo continues to play very well, queen b4, and Fabi continues to persist in not wanting a queen trade, and Nepo continues to persist in having a queen trade. So some dancing around happens with the queens, and bishop to d6 from Nepo. And now this is smart because Fabi's main asset is this passed d pawn. If Fabi could perhaps get it moving with bishop f4, d6, d7, then he really could generate some real threats. So Nepo sensibly blocks the bishop here, g3. Now, an interesting variation here is if Fabi goes for mate, Nepo retreats back to f8, then we have d6. And suddenly this is very interesting. But unfortunately, you run into mate. So Nepo has a very ingenious defense so that Fabi doesn't go after things. King f8, queen to f3, and according to the computer, this spoils white's advantage, but when the computer eval is plus 0.5 in Super Grandmaster play, it really doesn't mean too much. So while the computer may label this as a mistake, allowing a forced draw for Nepo, and Nepo holds the draw without much difficulty, practically, queen to f3 does not make much of a difference. Queen e1, king g2, f5. And Fabi playing to expose Nepo's king a little bit, but Nepo defending very, very solidly. Now he finally gets the chance to take the queens off the board. And this f3 basically offering a draw from Fabi because now it's going to be very difficult for Fabi to work around this d6 bishop. The h6 pawn is stuck on a dark square. If you want to reinforce it with g5, it's stuck on a dark square. The g6 pawn controls f5. The b pawn controls c5. The bishop covers e5. And it'll be very difficult for Fabi's king to penetrate into this position. And e4 is about as far as Fabi can go here. So he tries to make inroads on the queen side here, bishop c7, and some maneuvering. So what's the point of the maneuvering? Not much. Nepo begins to try to play with the b pawn, but this really isn't that much of a deal. Bishop g7. Fabi really is pretty safe here. Nepo realizes that pushing this b pawn doesn't really work. because Fabi's king is right here. There really isn't much in the position. Now, bishop g7, I guess I would call this a last ditch trap, because now queens, but Nepo is a super grandmaster and doesn't fall for things like that. And there really isn't progress to make here for both sides. So after bishop to d6, the players agreed to a draw with plenty of time on their clocks, and not much position left to be played. So objectively correct decision from both sides to accept the draw, and there really isn't much to do here. You could play king e4, preventing bishop f4, but maybe not even necessary. King c3, and if bishop f4, you go g5, and the position is dead. Very very high credit to both players for the level of play in the game. Even though it may be considered bland and it was very drawish the whole way, that speaks to how well these people are playing chess. Sometimes when you hear people complain that modern chess is becoming too boring, there's too many draws. Well, that's also fairly reflective of the level of play and the type of play um, that is going on in modern chess, because the accuracy for this game was very high from both sides. No player took unnecessary risks to complicate the game. So I would say that's a very, very good game from both sides. Both sides should be happy about the draw, and that'll be it. So now we'll move on to our second game of the day, Wang Hao versus Kirill Aleksenko, also drawn. There were no decisive games today, although we will get to the two that were potentially closest, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave versus Alexander Grischuk, and Ding Liren versus Anish Yeri later. So we have a red T from Wang Hao, and just decides to Bianchetto, and not super complicated, but this is evidently his preparation. A5, been played before several times. Bishop f5, bishop b2, a4. B takes a4, rarer, but still played. Queen a5, queen to b3, knight b to d7. Trades happen. Rook f to c1. Rook a6 is the novelty here from Kirill Aleksenko, but it looks like a decent move, preparing to put the rook perhaps on c6. You could also play rook to c8, but evidently this is Kirill's prep. So e3 captures a4, bishop f1 attacks the rook. So trades happen b3, trades happen a1. Knight to b6, rook a7, and pawns are defended and positions are held. Trades happen. So very high level of play from both sides here. Wang Hao looks aesthetically to have the better position, but this should not have a. But Kirill should not have a problem holding this. Trades happen again, and now things really begin to get interesting here, because Wang Hao wants to push his main asset, the c pawn, and he gets the opportunity to, but he has to give up this pawn, and now e4, recommended move by the computer. Watching it, but it recommends knight to c4. Potentially going after the b pawn. However, the game continuation also very, very interesting and fascinating. Knight captures on e4. Bishop captures on e4, c7. So what Wang Hao has done in sacrificing the piece is basically assured that he's going to win in exchange because of this passed pawn. So we'll see how this works out. For him, rook f8, bishop c4, king h8, bishop e6. Again, he is putting himself in position to control c8. He cannot put the rook on the back rank because the bishop controls all of the key squares. So bishop f5, c8, queen. Just like we were talking about, Wang Hao picks up the exchange, but Aleksenko has the bishop pair and the outside passed b pawn. So In a practical game, with your host speaking, this looks very comfortable for black, and black really shouldn't have too many problems holding this. The bishop pair versus the rook is typically better for the bishop pair, but here the rook is very active for white on the 7th rank, so neither side really should have problems holding this game. Um, and even though Wang Hao gets a piece back, this powerful setup for Wang Hao, sorry, Kirill Alexenko, just holds everything, and it's going to be hard for this rook to make much more inroads. And here the players agreed to a draw because black's dark squared and light squared control is very impressive here. This rook cannot get much more active for white, and the only threat white has is to very slowly dance the king all the way to g8. And this threat is so slow that Kirill will have no problems dealing with it. He is more than content to just sit oscillating the bishop back and forth, and he will be just fine, maybe even playing e3, buying him some more space. So very, very solid game from both sides. So now we'll get on to some of the more potentially decisive games of the day here between Alexander Grischuk, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. We have another Ruy Lopez. We have another Berlin. We have another modern Berlin. Knight captures e4, and this is all very, very standard Berlin endgame. And we've seen this variation where King e8 was played earlier in the tournament. So play keeps happening. Very, very standard stuff. This has been played many, many times. I believe that we saw this variation itself earlier in the tournament in a Grischuk game. He's more than happy to repeat it here. Rook f to e1, bishop b4, a3, trades happen c3, h4, g4 from Maxime, captures on g3, captures g3, knight e7. And the only game of this to date is between Vachier-Lagrave and Nakamura from 2018, where g4 was played. Here, Maxime opts for a different idea, goes h4 is the novelty here, knight to d5, bishop to c1, knight captures on c3, rook d3, knight a4. So Grischuk has won a pawn, but there will be practical difficulties in converting this with his doubled c-pawns. And really, Maxime does not have significant problems in this position. So both players continue building their structure, king e7, h5. And here comes Maxime, rook h6, g4. And now this rook is kind of walled out of the game because besides going to h8, it doesn't have much else to do. So it has to go back, a4. And now this is a very, very interesting pawn sacrifice for Maxime that may give him some advantage. Takes bishop a3 was the game continuation. Rook e4 is also very promising for Maxime. So if bishop b5, c4 wins pretty much for Maxime. Bishop back to a6, bishop a3 check. Much better position for Maxime here. So, but instead he goes immediate bishop a3, c5, e6, and most of Maxime's forces are channeled in this direction, so it's a very, very thematic. So now he picks up a pawn on c5, and now this isn't a piece sacrifice from Maxime because he can pick up the bishop on c4, but he makes a very important intermezzo whizzing a pawn. Rook takes c7, king d6 takes on c4. And now if we look at the position, it's 4 pawns each. And Maxime is probably a bit better here because black's double g pawns are not very aesthetically pleasing, and he has this nice passed e6 pawn, which he can defend with both of his rooks. However, Grischuk does have counterplay, and that involves the a pawn. Probably not accurate. probably best to go after the e-pawn, but Grishchuk is in his trademark time trouble here. Is less than a minute on the clock. Maxime has an overwhelming time lead, but doesn't find the correct continuation here. He plays rook to d1. Rook to d4 check looks better because it allows doubling on the d file without loss of time. And it so let's take a look at this rook d4 line. King c6, rook ed1 goes after this pawn. King b5, rook c7, and now Maxime's rook is very active, attacking both of the pawns. King b6, trades happen, and this position would probably be slightly better for Maxime due to these nice connected passed pawns on the king side, but instead he plays rook to d1. So king e7, rook e4, holding pawns. And Maxime trying to continue to chase pawns. He gets his pawn, but at a bit of a price. This a pawn is now very nice for black, and Maxime feels compelled to eliminate it. Trades happen, and this is dead drawn with proper technique, and both sides show us how to play this endgame. King e5, king f3, king d4, king c2, king c3, king d1, b5, and Maxime does not have a problem stopping the pawn, and they have successfully played until bare kings. Maxime was likely a little bit better with some very interesting pawn sacrifices in there, but Grishchuk held the game without too much trouble. So now we'll get into our final game of the day, Ding Liren versus Anish Yuri. Both sides are 1 out of 3 coming into the day. And the final move of the game here is really the one we're going to want to pay attention to, but we will get to that when it happens. So have a nice Catalan, bishop b4 check, bishop to d2, and we kind of have a Catalan Bogo Indian hybrid here. So I'm assuming this is somebody's prep. I don't quite know whose, but castles, queen to c2, c5, pretty thematic in these types of structures to hit with c5, whether it's in a Nimzo Indian or a Bogo Indian here. C captures d5, c captures d4, knight takes. Queen to b6, intermediate move, hits the knight on d4, and allows himself to pick up on d5 next move. So e3, e captures on d5, castles. And very, very solid from both sides. Rook b8 is the novelty from Anish, but we'll see. He's trying to target b2, and we'll see what happens. But bishop captures b4, queen captures b3. So Ding sets up this pawn structure and shuts down the threats on the b file from Anish. h5, knight c3, h4. So Anish switches to a king side. Knight back to e2, bishop d7, knight f4. Trades happen on g3, bishop f3. Inaccurate, but knight to d3 gains a tempo on the queen, likely slightly better for Ding. a4, and we have a broken queenside structure for Ding, so Anish doesn't have a problem picking up the pawn again. Knight c5, rook a5, a4, and so now Anish has doubled on the a file, but not a problem. Bishop to d1 from Ding, and he holds. King f1, king f8. Both sides bring their kings into the game. Rook ab1. 94, trades happen. Rook b7, Ding activating his rooks. c5, bishop to b3, and trades happen again. Both sides continuing to improve their position. Bishop c2. Taking allows taking on a4, so evidently Ding did not want to play that. King back to d6, king to d2, king c5, king c3, rook a6, and this is fairly symmetrical. Neither side is really going to be able to push their passed pawn because For Anish to be able to push the passed pawn here, he needs to get a rook onto either b3 or d3 to check the king and move it away. That's not possible. Also, taking on a4 is not going to be possible either, so it's impossible to move Ding's king from c3. However, it isn't possible for Ding to dislodge Anish's king either, because checking squares are going to be impossible, since if the rook moves from the a file, Anish grabs the a pawn. So instead, some kingside play, a5, trying to get some play here, bishop c6, just defending the e4 pawn, and some shuffling on the a file, and king to d5. And now the evaluation drastically shoots up for white. And according to lead chess here, the players agreed to a draw, which is strange since the computer now shows a huge plus for white. So let's check out this main line for an advantage for Ding. Captures, and now Ding has the opportunity to remove the c pawn with check, move the e pawn, king takes a5, rook e5 check, and he munches on g5. And this could be a technically winning game for Ding. So I'm rather confused on to why the players agreed to a draw on king to d5. My hypothesis is that this was simply the move on the DGT boards to show a draw. If you guys don't know how DGT boards work, it's an electronic chessboard. You show a draw by placing two kings on central squares that are of the opposite color. That's how you'd show a draw. So here you would put the white king on d4 and the black king on d5, for example. It shows the board that the game was drawn. So that's my hypothesis for why king to d5 pops up here. So rook a2 seems to be the draw move, and king to d5 seems to be the move on the DGT boards to show the draw after king to d4. So that's at least my hypothesis for why the draw was agreed to here. If you, the viewer, have anything different that you guys think about the position, I would love to hear about it in the chat. But that's it for the games for today, and I just want to give a huge shout out to all the players today coming off of the rest day. Everybody was very well prepared for this game. The novelties came very deep into the opening. Both sides were tremendously prepared and were extremely accurate. To give you guys an idea of how accurate the games were today, I did some research for you, the viewer, and according to my research here, the average centi pawn loss, which is a measure of accuracy for chess games, the players today combined had an average of a 9.375 centi pawn loss. That is insanely good. For those of you who do not know what a centi pawn loss is, it is the chess evaluation metric for a hundredth of a pawn. So having a 0 centi pawn loss means that they made the perfect moves all the way, and the higher and higher the centi pawn loss gets, the worse and worse it gets. I've seen games of over 200 between low-rated players on lead chess, so it can get very bad. But these guys today, huge credit to them. 9.375 was the average centi pawn loss. The worst centi pawn loss today was 11 from 3 players. That's extremely, extremely accurate from all of the 8 players. So huge kudos to them. As a little comparison. The 8 games played today, like I said, 9.375. The average setting pawn loss. Your esteemed host for the Candidates After Party played a over the board tournament in December, and his average setting pawn loss for the games was 42.57. Now that is 4.5 times less accurate, according to Sunnypawn, than the players today. So that's really a huge accuracy from the players. My best game was 18 Sunnypawn in that tournament. The worst game played here today was 11. So that's really insane accuracy. Hoping that tomorrow, as the games continue, the games can be very similarly precise, but also let's, as chess fans, also hope for some more action in the games. It would be really great to see some nice attacking, some nice decisive games as well. I know that all you, the viewers, love to see that as well. So that's all I've got for you guys today for the Candidates After Party with AChessB. I'll be back here tomorrow at the same time, checking out games from round 5. So I appreciate all you guys sticking with me today. And now let's go raid somebody. How about that? So let's raid. Why not? Let's raid Hikaru. Because he is just a great guy. So, Hikaru, I hope you appreciate my viewers coming over to you. Thank you guys for checking out the Candidates After Party with AChessB today. And I hope to see you guys back here tomorrow or fairly soon. Enjoy Hikaru's stream.